Zoom news conference, which is co-hosted by California Black Media. I'm Sandy Close, Director of EMS and co-moderator for today, along with California Black Media Executive Director Regina Brown Wilson. Our focus is on a new study just released by California Black Women's Collective Empowerment Institute. We're so pleased to learn about and connect with this nonprofit organization. The study is on the systemic barriers Black women face in the workplace in California. The study draws on a survey of 452 Black women in the state about the workplace discrimination they experience, including wage disparities, lack of access to leadership roles, microaggressions, among other examples. And the study recommends urgent policy reforms. Our guests today include Kellie Todd Griffin, President and CEO of California Black Women's Collective Empowerment Institute and co-author of the study. Dr. Shikari Byerly with EVITARUS Research, which conducted the survey. Dr. Sharon Uche, researcher with the Empowerment Institute, who also co-authored the study with Kellie Todd Griffin, and Glenda Gill, President and CEO of Save a Girl, Save a World. We are honored to have all of you here today and to also introduce you to the remarkable ethnic media colleagues who form the audience for today and who also will be receiving a report from EMS on today's briefing if they were unable to attend. Regina Brown Wilson, will you say a few words about the Institute for which you are a board member and take it away with introducing our first speaker?
Yes, Sandy, thank you so much. And thank you all, reporters, for being here today. It's really, really important. I am the chair of the Institute, and I am extremely honored to be able to allow some of the most brightest minds look at some of the most challenging issues that face African American women in our state and looking at policy solutions that can help create parity and bring equity to the table so that all of our valued members of our communities are treated and get the same opportunities that everyone else gets. And so for that, I'm very, very excited about being a part of this work, but I'm also excited to be able to marry the work that I do on the daily with ethnic media and with Black media, and then be able to pair it with remarkable people like Kellie Todd Griffin and Shikari Byerly, Dr. Byerly, who has been doing surveys. And you probably have seen EVITARUS, their company's name, around because they have done a lot of different surveys for a lot of different foundations, and not just Black organizations, but that is one of their specialties. But they've done that work on being able to get us to have a perspective on various issues, from the environment to media to health, and now what you're seeing right here today. So with that, without further ado, I want to go ahead and begin and let Kellie Todd Griffin, who is the president and CEO of the collective, the Black Women's Collective Empowerment Institute, talk about what prompted the organization to conduct the survey and the relevance of the findings for today. So, Ms. Todd Griffin, I'll let you go ahead.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you, Sandy, for having us here today. I really appreciate the work that you all do. I have followed Sandy and your work way back when I was doing work when I worked for then Assemblymember Karen Bass. So I appreciate this full circle moment where now I'm leading an organization. And so this report is focused on the invisible labor struggles of Black women throughout California. I'm Kellie Todd Griffin. I'm the president and CEO of the Collective Empowerment Institute. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We serve as the anchor organization for the California Black Women's Think Tank with our academic partner, Cal State University Dominguez Hills. We elevate our voice, power, and participation to secure adequate representation and reparations by amplifying issues and priorities that are vital to Black women and girls using data to drive policy change and practice transformation. We wanted to do this particular research because far too long Black women have been caught in the crosshairs of the intersection of race and gender. And we wanted to look at how Black women are experiencing the workplace, where there is systemic barriers that limit their opportunities. And so to confront this issue, we understand that data is very important. So we contracted with EVITARUS, which, as Regina mentioned, is a leading public opinion research firm that also provides strategic consultants to document the lived realities of Black women in the workplace. But before we start, we wanted to give just a snapshot of Black women in California. And so I will hand it off to Dr. Sharon Uche.
Awesome, thank you. So hi, I'm Dr. Uche, and I'm just going to set the stage for the status of Black women in California and a bit of some research that we've done in the past that speak to the research that we are going to present today. So there are 1.1 million Black women in California, which is the fifth largest population in the country. So because of this, there's unique challenges that create barriers and disparity gaps when we talk about servicing Black women in California. And these inequalities exist at the intersection of both race and gender. And because of this, sometimes it makes it a little difficult to maintain economic stability. So in 2023, we conducted research focusing on the Black women experience in California, interviewed 1,252 Black women across the state. And a few of those findings talked about difficulty with inflation, with 4 in 5 Black women stating that 8 in 10 talked about discrimination or being mistreated because of their race or gender being noted as a key issue. And then we also see that also being impacted with income and earning. And then also, although those inequalities exist, we notice that Black women do have higher educational achievement or attainment than the audiences or the demographics that their income has become lower than. So we see that their salaries are still not on par with white women, white men, and or at the California median wage. Awesome. And this graph kind of just speaks to some of that data. The blue shows all of California from the years 2017 to 2021. And then here you see the other ones, Black, white, Latina, and the different backgrounds or marginalized backgrounds that are women in California and the different incomes that go along with them. And then you see kind of how Black women rank in comparison to the other demographics. Next slide. Awesome. And then, so disrupting disparities and ending the Black women wage gap in California. So last month, we actually released a report looking at the gap in earnings between Black women, Black single moms, and white men with the California Center of Budget and Policy. And we noticed systematic inequalities and economic disparities present. And a unique set of challenges specifically for Black women and even more specifically for Black single moms. So we're seeing that Black single moms are earning the least when you're looking at white men and Black women, with white men earning $90,000 and Black women earning $54,000, leaving single moms at $50,000. And this is notable because more than half of Black families in California are led by single Black women. So similarly, Black women also made a similarly, Black single mothers also made less. Single moms made about $53,000 in comparison to just the $90,000 that white men made. Next slide. Thank you. So yes, so they made nearly 40,000 less. And so these graphs just kind of show that stark difference that you're seeing in between both of these audiences. The next slide. Okay, so, and because of the disparities, we're seeing it impact the quality of life for Black single moms. So the money that they could be making, those are additional years of basic necessities that they can get. So for example, for like the monthly cost of groceries, with closing that gap, that's an additional 8 years of groceries. That's an additional year of housing and rent, 19 years of utilities, and an astronomical amount of, amount for gas and cell phone services, and also things like diapers and childcare. So all of those things, they could be added to with the gap being closed, leading to a better quality of life for Black women, Black single mothers in particular in California. And speaking further to that research, this economic gap is not projected to close for nearly 100 years. And this graph here kind of shows that data, with the orange line representing the projected rate for Black women, and then that line, the navy line, showing the projections for white men. And yeah, so it's just kind of showing that where they meet is years 21 away. So just showing that large gap. All right. And then we're going to go over to Dr. Byerly, and she'll be going over some of the research that we are presenting and releasing today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Uche. My name is Dr. Shakari Byerly, and I am the managing partner and also director of polling and research at EVITARUS Public Opinion Research. I'll be reviewing findings today on the next slide from the California Black Women's Workplace Experience Study. This is a study that connected insights from 452 employed Black women across California. The questions that we explored included their levels of job satisfaction and perceptions of workplace climate, their levels of access to opportunities for advancement and professional development and growth, as well as their experiences with racism and discrimination, and the aspects of their job or workplace that were most important to them. While many Black women in California derive a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment from their work, most face significant barriers to advancement and feel their contributions are underappreciated and undervalued. A full 57%, nearly 3 in 5 Black women in California have experienced racism or discrimination at work in just the last year. On the next slide, you'll see a bit about our survey methodology. So we pulled our sample using a combination of non-probability elements, including a registration-based sample and EVITARUS's proprietary panel of Black Californians. The survey was conducted or fielded in early to mid-December of last year online, and that included both texting as well as invitations native to the web to participate in the study. We have weighted the data by region and income, so that's reflective of California overall. And so as we go through the numbers, you'll notice that some of the percentages may not sum to 100 due to rounding. On the next slide, you'll see our key findings. Really the backdrop of the labor and challenges that Black women face situate against their aspirations. Black women in California, according to the study, identify salary, benefits, work-life balance, and job security as highly important feature of quality opportunities. This may not be surprising. These findings may be similar for other populations, but it stands in stark contrast to the ceiling that Black women report facing in their jobs. To be sure, most Black women in California's workforce are able to find at least some sense of satisfaction and personal fulfillment, as well as empowerment in their work. However, few would say that they are very satisfied. More precisely, 59% report being at least somewhat satisfied in their job, but a notable proportion, 38%, say that they are unsatisfied. That's nearly 2 in 5 Black women. When it comes to drivers of this dissatisfaction, identify compensation advisors and company leadership and the work environment or culture as primary contributors to that dissatisfaction. On the next slide, one of our most striking findings, nearly 3 in 5 Black women, or 57%, as I mentioned previously, have experienced racism and or discrimination at work. And most report that these experiences have been damaging to their physical as well as their mental health. Nearly half of Black women in California feel marginalized, excluded from, or passed over for work opportunities. Few feel fully confident that leadership and opportunities for advances are available to them. In fact, only 16% strongly agree that opportunities for leadership and or advancement in their workplace are available to them. Finally, a solid majority of Black women, despite these statistics, are able to find at least some level of support in the workplace from their supervisors or colleagues. Let's dig into some of the more detailed findings. As I mentioned previously, we asked Black women about their ideal job or workplace and how important a range of factors might be to them. Salary, benefits, work-life balance, and job security rank at the top of the list as highly important workplace priorities for Black women. The next slide. Just to give some sense of the motivations and what drives Black women to get up every day for work. Providing for their families and a sense of personal fulfillment motivate many. In the words of one administrative staff person, a Black woman who works in the nonprofit sector, age 62 in the Inland Empire, in her words, my clients and the service I give to them, the work with disabled adults in all aspects of their lives. When they accomplish one thing that needs to change in their lives, I've done a good thing for people that are rejected, lied on, betrayed on, abandoned, thrown out, and left by everyone of their families that refused to have anything to do with my clients. Another woman, a 28-year-old woman from the Bay Area, she did not disclose her role, but she works in the private sector. What gets her up every day to go to work is the necessity that I need money in order to provide for my family. So you see this tension here. There are women who are able to find work that inspires them, in which they feel like they are making important contributions. But there are also other women who are driven by economic insecurity into situations where they may be facing the toll of discrimination, racism, and other forms of harm in the workplace. On the next slide, when we asked about the opportunity that is available to Black women to get ahead in the state, few say that they believe that there's a good amount of opportunity for Black women specifically. In fact, only 7% say that there's a great deal of opportunity. Only 15% say a good. 2 in 5 say that there's some opportunity, but more than a quarter, or 28%, say there is little to no opportunity for Black women in the state. That said, when we look at those who express at least some level of satisfaction, and remember that's 59% of Black women who say they're at least somewhat satisfied in their jobs, the top 3 factors that drive that satisfaction are salary, personal fulfillment, work-life balance. And you'll see a range of other characteristics mentioned there as well. Job security also ranks in the top tier of those items. Here is work environment or work culture, their colleagues, opportunities for growth. And in the bottom tier, we find company organization, leadership, and supervisors. On the flip side of that, you'll see that 38% are dissatisfied in their current job. And that's really driven by lower salary levels, supervisors or work environment that some might describe as problematic or toxic, or as we'll see later in the results, many women are facing microaggressions. On the next slide, you'll see the findings related specifically to racism and discrimination. So we asked women, thinking about the last 12 months, have you experienced racism or discrimination in any of the following places? At the top of the list is at work, followed by shopping. 57% say that they have experienced racism or discrimination. And I will say that correlated with some of the other questions, that 57%, 74% of them say that it's race-based discrimination. Next slide. We presented survey respondents with a range of statements and asked the extent to which they agreed or disagreed with them. And what we found, particularly as it relates to opportunity, is that 50% or half of women at the bottom of the screen reject the idea that there are opportunities for leadership or advancement in their workplace. To be sure, many do feel that their workplace does foster some sense of respect for all people. 22% would say that they strongly agree that there's a welcoming climate and that their contributions are acknowledged. But you see that we have a third or more who find workplaces that are not welcoming, that do not feel that the workplace culture fosters respect for all people, or that their contributions are acknowledged. On the next slide. We also have this tension with workplace climate when it comes to the value and appreciation for the labor that Black women provide at work. A majority actually feel unappreciated at work, and many feel marginalized, excluded from, or passed over specifically for opportunities. And as you'll see, the second bar from the bottom, a good majority of them, or a good number of them, feel that the climate in their workplace is actually toxic. The next slide. We asked women if they felt that they had at least some support from supervisors or colleagues in their workplace. And a majority feel at least somewhat supported by their supervisor or their colleagues. Specifically, 36% say they feel at least somewhat supported, 28% say very much so by their supervisor, but a full 1/3 say no, they do not feel supported by their supervisor at work. The number is slightly lower for colleagues. 26% say they do not have support from their colleagues at work. On the next slide, you'll see that this may be correlated with unfair judgment by a supervisor or a boss. So we asked specifically, thinking about your current workplace, have you ever been judged unfairly by your supervisor or your boss? 48%, or nearly half, say yes. And we've broken down some of the demographic indicators here. So we see that the unfair judgment is higher for those who are working at companies between 50 and just under 250 employees. It's higher in healthcare and those working in healthcare and medical services, with a full 53% saying yes, they've been judged unfairly, as well as in government. And we also have some disparities by the ethnicity of the supervisor. The next slide. Nearly 1/3 have had a member of management make a negative comment about them, and 81% say that those comments were unjustified. 32%, to be exact, have had negative comments by a supervisor, and then you can see the breakdown there again by different types of workplaces. Some of the same patterns persist as the unfair judgment by supervisors. On the next slide. We asked specifically how much different factors may have contributed to the negative comments that Black women have received at work. Race and ethnicity is at the top of the list. 64% say that race and ethnicity contributed a lot, combined with a majority who say the intersectionality. both race and gender or their identity as a Black woman is leading to unfair treatment and negative comments about them, particularly from their supervisors or leadership in their places of work. On the next slide, we asked again about specifically the last 12 months, if any of the following things had happened to the women in the study in their workplace. And you can see 2 and 5 or more are saying that their contributions or accomplishments were not valued. Almost half say yes. They were subjected to stereotypes. They were asked to perform work or take on responsibilities for which they were not compensated. Others were talked down to or subjected to loud or disrespectful communication at work by a supervisor or a coworker. And 38% say they were accused or thought of as an angry Black woman. Finally,
So I'm gonna, no, please go with your final. This is such valuable data, and we have questions on the chat. So I was gonna say, can you give us one more slide, and then let's catch up with some of the questions.
absolutely. Finally, looking at the other indicators of workplace treatment, the lack of career advancement is particularly striking. We have more than a third who say that they've been overlooked for promotions or job opportunities, that opportunities for advancement were shared with others, but not shared with them specifically. They're not being invited to important meetings, and coworkers or others in the workplace are receiving coaching, mentorship, or other helpful information about how to be successful, but they are not receiving that same kind of support. More than a quarter indicate that. And race and ethnicity is at the top of the list when we look at the contributing factors to discrimination and unfair treatment, as well as skin tone and age. And we have a few quotes there on the slide that really bring to life the experiences that underlie the data that you're seeing in these slides. So with that, I'm happy to pause for questions.
Great.
So Dr. Byerly, and we'll get to Glenda next, but Dr. Byerly, I do want to catch up the folks who've done some presentation because there were quite a few I was getting direct messages too. So, and this is really interesting because I think Kellie, you probably mentioned this, so I feel bad because I can't remember if it was not you or Dr. Uche, but there's a question in the chat that is asking, what is at work mean, given that so many people work from home and aren't in office? And I just thought how funny that is because that's on the cusp of, the governor ordering everybody back to work. I mean, that's in the public sector, but ordering everybody back to work 4 days a week. So what does at work mean?
That's a great question. We didn't define it for those who participated in the study. It was their job, their current employer specifically. So we did not nail down their physical location per se, but this was related to the dynamics or the culture with the people with whom they are working, whether it's working from home or whether it's working in the office. And we know that microaggressions don't have to be in the same physical space. We can have microaggressions in virtual spaces, in emails, as we are seeing in some of the current administration. So it was not constrained to any physical location.
Regina, can I bump my question, which is burning?
Oh, go ahead. I'll go to the nieces after that, but go ahead.
Great. To what extent, and this would be for all our speakers so far, is gender a factor in the discrimination the women you interviewed face?
It's the compounding nature of being both Black and female. So it's not either or, but we do know that as the one of the last slides, that the race element, specifically being a Black woman, is unique, and we see it come through in many of the questions, and particularly the skin tone. One of the quotes that I didn't get to read talked about darker skinned women receiving either harsher treatment or fewer opportunities than those with lighter skin tones.
And just as a quick follow-up, years ago, decades ago, how people wore their hair was a key factor, whether you were a man or a woman. Was your afro too big? Was it too small? Now there are so many different aspects of hairstyle. I'm just curious whether anybody mentioned getting drawing remarks or being asked to change the way they um, style their hair.
Yes, hair as well as body type was also mentioned as, one of those characteristics for which Black women are singled out for differential and discriminatory treatment.
Great. Back to you, Regina.
Okay. So this is from Sunita, Dr. Byerly. Did Black women find more satisfaction at jobs where their employers were Black? And if so, were there more opportunities for better advancement and better pay?
We actually did see that in the survey results. So more specifically, for women who said that their supervisor was Black or Black women, 62% report satisfaction. And that's markedly higher, nearly 10 points higher than women with supervisors of other ethnicities. We also know that having more Black women colleagues makes a difference of the level of the opportunities for advancement as well as the satisfaction with workplace environment.
Great. And Pilar has this question: how do you expect these issues to be addressed in this day and age when any program to remediate equity issues are deemed to be racism and not merit, and when the assault on DEI programs by the president is just but one example of today's environment? I don't know, anyone can answer that or
Can we let Glenda speak, because I think that was some of what Glenda was going to talk through.
to talk through. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So
So
we'll
she
hold
can
that.
answer that. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll hold that question. Let's see here. So, Glenda, we will go ahead and bring our final speaker up, which is Glenda Gill, who works with Save a Girl, Save the World, and who will share her perspective on the survey data for Black women and girls. Go ahead, Glenda.
You're
You're on
on
mute.
mute.
Great, thank you. I was saying there was a problem. You had me muted. Yes, hi everyone. I might stumble a little bit because I just came back from the dentist, so you can see my mouth is kind of frozen on the side. But I wanted to say this data highlights that we haven't made much progress in moving the needle. Systemic barriers still exist when it comes to Black women, even in a liberal state like California. It's amazing to me because I pulled a couple of data points that are not on the deck, but they were my own data points because I represent young women that attend HBCUs. Our organization, Save a Girl, Save a World, is a multi-generational mentoring organization, and we work with young women about building their self-esteem and preparing them for the workforce that they desire and they dream of. And so
when you say HCB, could you just, for the purposes of all our media, tell us?
HBCUs are historically Black colleges and universities.
Thank you.
Okay. And knowing that Black women are the fastest growing demographic of employees and entrepreneurs, and they make up 53% of the workforce. This is just really disturbing. So I believe we have to invest in policy change and practice transformation for the next generation. Because if we don't, they won't want to be involved. We hear from many of them talking about, they want to be entrepreneurs and create their own environment. But we do know the reality that we need people in the workforce. And if we don't address these issues, they're not going to worse. And we hear from them all the time. And things are different because of the generation. We have the generation that can do better together, because we know if this data for Black women, all women of color have similar experiences. If we improve the experiences of Black women, we will improve it for everyone. And I cannot appeal enough about what we must work together and create these allies across the race and the generation so that we can have a population of young people that want to be in the workforce and be a part of this community. And this data is compelling. And the house is on fire. And of course, the house is on fire on all different levels of where we are.
Could you tell us, when you say 53% of the workforce, could you break that down? Do you mean of the African American workforce?
So of approximately 1.9 million Black women who own businesses and are in the workforce, they make up 1.9 million Black women own firms, employ over 375,000 staffers, and make up 53% of the workforce.
Is that statewide? Is that the workforce across California? Is that?
It's a national number. I pulled a national number. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I think what she's saying of the women, Black women-owned businesses or Black-owned businesses, Glenda.
Yes.
Black women make 50. It's of the Black women-owned businesses or Black-owned businesses.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. And Regina, I didn't mean to interrupt the questions, but just because journalists are so conscious of how to use data without misinterpreting it, I just wanted to break down what the 53% was referring to.
No, I think that's your co-moderator. That's why we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that and Glenda, is your presentation done? I'm sorry.
Yes, my presentation is done, but I did want to someone had a question.
Yes.
You said it was going to be covered in the comments, but I couldn't hear the question.
I will restate it. So Pilar Moreno had a question about how do you expect these issues to be addressed in the day and age when any program to remediate equity issues are deemed to be racism and not merit-based, and when the assault on DEI programs by the president is just but one example of today's environment.
I think that in the communities that we serve, we're going to operate business like we operate business. The government is going to have these laws and all these criterias, but I still think that there is going to be more state type of laws that can apply to what we do and how we do it. And a lot of us what we have is nonprofits. And while we don't necessarily interface with the government, we interface with our community, which is another set of laws that we operate by. So I'm going to operate by the community laws. Of course, I will follow the state laws as much as possible. But when you're serving a community and the people they're speaking about are not in your community, what do? You just walk away and leave the community? No, you continue to serve. And so you have a standard that you serve by.
Right.
I also want to add to Glenda's point that the state policy context is really important, because when we look at where the reports of racism and discrimination and stereotyping and microaggressions are highest, it's actually in the public sector. That is something that from a policy perspective, we can do something about very directly. It's not that it's not happening in the private sector, it is, but it's not to the extent as it's happening in the public sector. And it's not to the extent that it's happening in the nonprofit sector. So there's, I think, a clear and direct line for improving the workplace experiences of Black women and addressing the racism and.
Great, thank you. So I want to be able to open up. If you have any other questions, please put them in the chat. I'm continue with this. I think that Sunita, you made a comment that said exactly, Sandy, do you remember the newscaster who got kicked off the air because she wore braids? So that was back to that question.
I think we have a perfect opportunity now to pivot back to Kellie, Todd, Griffin about the policy recommendations that the study is promoting based on the survey, because this is just where Glenda Gill has sort of helped us focus.
Yes,
Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you, Sandy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we produced a report based on the data that Sandy and Regina has, and that can distribute it after the call. But when we look at data, we also look at how can data drive policy change as well as practice transformation. So we provide legislative proposals as well as non-legislative proposals. From a legislative focus area, again, to the question about in the days of DEI, anti-DEI that we're currently in, the issues of how we address these disparities for Black women address disparities for everyone, because the dynamic of who Black women are, particularly in California, are still moms, they're still workers, they're still employees, they still represent all of California. We just took data to say, what are you experiencing that is uniquely yours as a Black woman? And so when we approach our solutions around many different things. The first thing we know that we have to strengthen is wage equity, to the information that Dr. Uche presented, as well as economic security to this way, to the work that Shikari and EVITARUS did to look at that intersection, because Black women aren't secure in their employment, which means we can't achieve wage equity if we don't address the workplace environment and some of the systemic issues that present when you have race and gender intersection. And if we improve it for Black women, we improve it for all women, and we improve it for all races. We just happen to have the intersectionality. We also want to look at how workplace discrimination and harassment really impacts the mobility, the economic mobility of Black women, and working with our policymakers at the local level, which is and state level, to eliminate the type of discrimination and harassment. And that is looking at current policies that are in place that we can strengthen the protections. And one of the things that we do at California Black Women's Collective Empowerment Institute is we really focus on the economic stability of Black women. So expanding leadership and career advancing opportunities. We conduct classes, programs for Black women in leadership, as well as Black women who are looking for pathways to secure employment with fair and just wages. We also know that it is really important for state-funded childcare. We released our report last week on the wage gap, and one of the areas that we're focusing on is childcare, because if 67% of Black households in California are headed by single moms, if we can if we can invest in childcare and continue to strengthen the investments that the state already has in childcare, then we can get Black women working faster, into the workplace faster, so there isn't a delay, and that will help them in their mobility. And then we want to again work on the oversight and accountability of workplace safety, working with the current policies and strengthening those policies, and also creating policies, particularly around in the OSHA environment, that make sure that Black women work in the workplace for Black women is safe, not just physically safe, but emotionally safe as well. And then anti-discrimination and accountability. We see that DEI is a situation we're dealing with, but that DEI, the stuff around DEI is not negating discrimination laws and policies that are on the books, and we need to adhere to those discrimination and policies and accountability. We've also talked about hair and the Crown Act that makes it against the law to discriminate against someone based on their natural hair. However, we have seen cases since that law has been enacted where where companies are still using things like, oh, it doesn't mean natural, it doesn't mean hair that isn't your natural hair, or we have a uniform policy and no one can wear their hair in braids. And so going after making sure that there's some accountability, or at least some ways to ensure that there's training for companies when we do have discrimination policies that are created to protect Black women and girls. So these are some of the areas that we want to focus on as we take this data and make this data actually have some practical applications.
I mean, it's extremely impressive. I just want to get a better sense of, in the environment we're in, where we've been told by one federal agency to avoid words like ethnic because they may attract charges that were violating the ending of DEI. What do you mean by the Workplace Safety for Black Women Act that would be able to monitor discrimination or wage disparity, for example? What does that mean concretely, Kellie, Todd, Griffin?
Yeah, so that's where we want a protection that is different than just the overall discrimination protection. And that protection is really the protection that includes the intersection of race and gender. We have had some policies that have been signed into law over the last couple of years that Senator Lola Smallwell Cuevas have put on the books around making sure that we're looking at data from an intersectionality standpoint, where it isn't just on race. So prior to the law, if you want to file a discrimination case against an employer, you had to select whether you were your race or your gender. You couldn't select it was because of your race and your gender. And that little change in law, meaning now you can select both race and gender, that had to be a legislative act to be able to create the ability for us to now be able to apply to apply a formal complaint based on race and gender. That's really what we're talking about, is that we have a legislative solution that really focuses on accountability, and the accountability is race and gender. That it's, if I'm a Black woman, I should be able to file a complaint because I'm a Black woman. If I'm a Latina, I should be able to file a complaint because I'm a Latina.
I can see that, and that is fascinating. I didn't realize that they were either or, and they should have been both and.
Yeah.
Question, though, which I think Pilar was trying to get at, is we have the federal Department of Justice having essentially eliminated the ability to file a complaint based on race discrimination with the Department of Justice. Maybe I'm over exaggerating that news. I don't want to spread misinformation. I just want to know the extent to which California is not going with the kind of general dismantling of programs aimed at monitoring and holding employers accountable for acts of discrimination based on race and gender.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the challenge for California is we have laws on the books. We also had, we eliminated affirmative action in 1996. So we have laws on the books in California that are supposed to protect all Californians. The reason we do the research that we do is to make sure we don't get caught into a national a national data around Black women, because Black women in California have different experiences than Black women in Mississippi. But it's interesting to know that Black women in California, Black women in Mississippi and Black women in California have the same wage gap. So we both are at the same as 57%, 57 cent, just like Mississippi. But in California, we're going to be asking our policymakers to make commitments to all Californians, which is inclusive of Black women. We are we are over 1.1 million, which is the fifth largest population in the nation of Black women. So we will we're a large state. We have great representation at every level. And so we're asking that this data gives us an opportunity to have the conversation of how do we ensure that Black women in California can experience what everyone else experienced in California and make sure that we have economic security. We can take care of our families, that we have jobs that pay fair and just wages. I don't know why we wouldn't be able to achieve that in the state. Politics are local. We all know that.
Mm-hmm. So this is a question that just popped in the chat and it went back to the hair question, and anyone on the panel can actually answer this, but the conversation about hair, braids, specifically crossover with some Native communities who also encounter hair bias-based discrimination. Wondering if building coalitions about this has been explored by any advocacy group seeking stronger policy-based protections. Further, how did respondents discuss or describe the instances of lateral violence or discrimination from non-white supervisors and colleagues? Shakari, I don't know if that's a you question or not.
Yeah, the second part is Shakari.
So the first part about coalition building, and what's great about this call is that media from across the racial and ethnic audiences served by ethnic media are joined and clearly interested in this topic.
Yeah, for us, I don't think we can do it without coalition building. We are 7% of the state population. We need to have a collective voice as we approach the issues where there's intersectionality in the issues. When we talk about hair discrimination, it doesn't, if you look at the Crown Act, it doesn't say anything specific to Black women. It talks about hair and hair that's culturally, that are uniquely for women who like to wear their hair naturally. What does natural mean? We're not the only culture that straightens our hair to present into the corporate environment, which is why we wanted to do this research around what do Black women experience. I also suspect that when we look at other cultures, some of the same issues will come up. And one of the things that Shakari shared as well was around supervisors, and we looked at every race of supervisors, and there was a significant percent of Black supervisors that they had the same experience, whether they were Latino or whether they were white supervisors, and that was important to us. But coalition building for us, that's, as a collective, we have to do that. We build across our culture because Blacks are not monolithic either. And then we have to also engage others where there is commonalities in the issues. And then as women, we also build coalitions with our female counterparts as well.
Great.
So I know that
Go
I'm
for it,
looking.
Regina.
Yes, no, I'm looking at the time and keeping us on time and keeping the journalists on time. But I want to do a final round of questions and really kind of look, this is something fun that Sandy likes to do too, when we end some of our calls. And I want to look at each speaker to respond to what would you think a good headline, what headline would you want to see um, from this study? If you were reading and open up the newspapers next week, what headline would you like to see? And we can start with you, Glenda, or whoever wants to be on the hot seat first. Shikari, whoever wants to be on the hot seat first.
You're starting with me?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
why not?
The headline for me would be it would be too long.
That's right.
Wait, it would be
That's okay.
the issues to put out the fire. We're working on the issues to put out the fire.
Oh, that's a great headline because it makes you want to know more. So great headline. Okay.
Dr. Sharon?
I would have multiple headlines, honestly. The first one would probably have something connecting discrimination in the workplace to the wage gap. Another would kind of hone in on some of the stereotypes and microaggressions that Black women face in the office that speak to the discrimination.
Okay. You want to try one of them? You want to just try to take a stab real quick?
Yeah. See, that's why there's journalists on the call.
What we always say, we want to see what you want to, we want to
Listen,
make sure we're being.
It would say something like, examining, see, I'm an academic, examining the background of it would say something like a deeper look into stereotypes and microaggressions impacting Black women in the workplace.
All right.
That's much better. That's closer. Great.
That's closer. It's closer. Dr. Byerly.
I have to find that unmute button. I think I would lead with Black women are being excluded. I would kind of play on the anti-DEI to really focus on the fact that Black women are being specifically harmed and excluded and treated inequitably in this environment where there's a Black backlash. So I would just give the stats. And I have to say, I love the title of the briefing, which is, I think that, Kellie, you'll say it best because I'll get it wrong, but it's like invisible labor, visible struggles. I think that's perfect. But I would have a headline that really flips the script on the current dominant narrative that people aren't being excluded because they are. And people are being harmed. And whenever there's harm, there needs to be redress. And I always say race-based harm, gender-based harm, race and gender-based harm require race and gender-based redress.
That's great. Okay.
Great. And Kellie?
I would say what I always say is having her say or having our say, Black women in the workplace. Because I think one of the things we do is make sure Black women have a voice.
Well, great. Well, thank you. And thank you to all the journalists that have joined us today. Just remember that we will have a recording. Jessica will be sending out the recording, a bio with headshots, and email addresses for any follow-up questions that you might have for any of the speakers today. I want to thank everybody for joining us and
Thank you.
look forward to being with you on the next briefing.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you for producing a very timely study based on your survey. We'll also
thank
be
you.
sending out a press advisory that goes into much of the details that Kellie, Todd, Griffin, and our speakers provided about the survey. So expect that in the next 3 or 4 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.